Um, oh, thank you. Founder of Canopy Ed, and also runs a statewide tutoring program servicing 1,000 plus students across the state of Louisiana each year. So definitely has experience working with state schools and schools in the US. So both today are going to be sharing with us their experience and their insight into working with schools in the US, but I think a lot of what they're talking about is going to be applicable internationally. And if you are interested in connecting with schools in the US specifically, you should get some insights into that. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to you two guys. Thank you very much for coming here today so early.
Excellent. Thanks everyone for having us and perfect. Great. I see William there. So William, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and then I will kick us off. Thank you, Georgina, for that. Can everyone see my screen here?
Yeah, we can.
And as Parsa is bringing that up, since we're a fairly small group, I'd love to know a little bit more about who's in the room. If people would like to drop in the chat, their name and just something about their work. If you're an independent tutor, if you're representing an organization, or the type of tutoring you do, et cetera, or if there's anything specific you'd like to get out of the session. If you could drop that in the chat here at the top, and then as we go, drop in questions and we'll pull them up and address them at the end.
Yeah, that would be excellent. And if the questions are directly addressing one of the topics that we're going into, I'm sure William and I will keep an eye on those questions and we can even pepper them in as we go. We will be discussing 3 topics today, and I'll turn it over before we jump in so that William can chime in as well. The first is the differences, just making sure we're all on the same page between servicing individual families with tutoring or tuition and supporting individual schools in the US. The second topic will be what is actually needed to win tutoring business with direct school district contracts. William will be speaking about what's called an RFP, a request for proposal. You can think of it as a tender. And then the third and last topic we'll go over today in our fast session is actually how to read through and respond to these RFPs, these requests for proposals. So if you as an individual, or more than likely as a member of a larger tutoring organization, actually want to source, vet, and actually apply to these contracts that are out there, these tenders, then hopefully you'll come away from this presentation with a better idea of how to do that. Now, William, before we go into the first topic, is there anything that you'd like to share about your background that you think would be relevant for the folks here?
I'll just share that I come to this work as an educator. I spent 5 years in the classroom. I was an instructional coach and ran tutoring programs in a program management capacity through a nonprofit that I founded as well. And then I spent the 2015-16 school year traveling the world, visiting top-ranked schools across 5 continents and writing about that experience before starting Canopy. And I also see people are starting to chime in with introductions. It's great to see the diverse array of folks that we have in the room here. Certainly.
And William, I think, undersold the scope of his business too. So he has both the tutoring services that he provides. So he's one of the largest approved tutoring service providers in one of the states in the US, Louisiana. And he also provides a platform focused on the actual teaching, the delivery of the tutoring as well. So keep that in mind in terms of putting questions in the chat. And as Georgina said previously, I ran with one of my co-founders a tutoring marketplace called Tutorfl.com prior to selling that company and focusing on just the software platform play as well. So I see a couple of mentions in the chat about having a one-person company or a smaller company and looking to expand. So I think William and I can really speak to any questions that you may have. Great. Well, let's start with the first topic then, and that's the difference between servicing families with tutoring versus servicing the school districts formally. And I do want to be clear before turning it back over to William, as hopefully the slide changes here. Looks like it's a little slow on mine. Great. So on the top half, that's what I'm going to speak about. And I'm going to turn it over to William for the bottom half that you see under the dividing line. Now, the top half is probably what a lot of us here are really familiar with, right? So you get a referral from another well-meaning parent, or maybe from a teacher at the school who highlights your student in a specific need, maybe or the parent's student in maths or in English or whatever it might be, and actually refers the family or refers the student to an individual tutor, and money is exchanged from the family to the tutor, and the tutor provides the services back to the family. Now, that's very different from schools subsidizing tutoring in the US. William, I'll turn it over to you to further highlight that difference.
Yep. So as you may be aware, there have been hundreds of billions of dollars that have been directed towards tutoring as a response to the coronavirus pandemic. The idea is that students have fallen behind and we need intentional strategies to catch them back up. And one-to-one and small group tutoring has the strongest research behind it as an effective strategy to catch students up. That word has caught fire across the US, and you have hundreds of millions or billions of dollars being funneled into tutoring in most states across the country. However, it is state by state. There is no real American education system. We have 50 different education systems, and then even within that, systems are fragmented by districts, and then you have charter networks, et cetera. So you will find a very bit of variety between different states and districts, but the bottom line is that there is a lot of money going into tutoring because tutoring is highly effective. The other side to that, though, is that it's not just money in people's pockets to spend on whatever tutoring they want. It tends to be highly regulated, and there tend to be processes to be approved to be one of the tutoring companies that can accept those dollars. And we'll get into that later in the presentation.
And William, let's actually get into that right now. And this will be the last slide for the folks here, so you get a sense of our pacing in this section about the difference between servicing individual families versus servicing schools, to provide that context. So it's great that people are putting some info in the chat. So Liz, for example, with Next Steps Tutors, whether you're providing, in person, so the face-to-face offline tutoring versus virtual tutoring, or a hybrid model, a mix of both. Still, the difference that William is highlighting is, for example, on the bottom, you'll see this is a real screenshot that I took from an approved list of tutoring vendors in the state of Louisiana. So in the US, we have these 50 states, and in each state, you might have a different list of approved vendors. And if you even drill down, I'd say William might even be guilty of oversimplifying. Even within a state, there are different regions, different school districts. So a school district, if you hear us saying that, is just a collection of individual schools. So you may have heard of Los Angeles Unified School District, for example. There are about 600,000 pupils in one district. And so you have many, many schools within the district. So Los Angeles Unified will put out what we call an RFP, a request for a proposal, so that tutoring companies around the country can apply. They can respond to the request for proposal to be featured. And the same thing sometimes happens at the state level, the State Department of Education. So if you have any questions about that as well, make sure to put them in the chat. That's very different from the top section you'll see on this slide, where in the US, there are sites like thumbtack.com where you can find someone to work on your house, or any sort of on-demand services. And tutoring is actually one of those. That is very different than being paid directly from schools. So for the rest of this presentation, the next two topics, we're going to assume that everyone knows the difference between servicing individual families and servicing schools. So we're all on the same level of understanding, the same foundation. If you're still unclear, please put a comment in the chat or test your understanding, and we'll go ahead and address that. William, before we jump into the second topic, which is focused on the background on the RFPs, is there anything that you would want to, any learnings you want to provide for the group before we move on?
Yeah, I just say, emphasizing the RFP angle, you often see two different types of RFPs as far as what districts are looking for from the type of provider they're working with. So some districts will put out a proposal where they're looking for a single provider. They're looking for one solution to come in and work with all of their students. And then the other model you see is an approved provider model, where they're looking to approve 6 or 7 or a dozen providers, and then individual schools and districts can choose from that list. The approved provider is probably more relevant to the folks on this call, but I'll just also mention that that doesn't mean that you're just getting that percentage of the market share. So in our example in Louisiana, there's over a dozen approved providers across the state, but us as Canopy, we do over 90% of the tutoring through that program in the state because we've run with it and been able to be a bit more effective.
Yep. And so parallel to draw for the folks on the call too, if you, your businesses or others that you've heard of have qualified for one of the tranches of the NTP's funding, the National Tutoring Program in the UK, you can think of it as a similar sort of setup. Because you're not guaranteed any sort of business. Let's say you're approved in a region to provide face-to-face, so the offline, the in-person, or the virtual tutoring, and then the individual schools can make their independent decisions. So that's why it's really important. We're finishing up the first topic here, going to the second topic, but the third topic will actually be focused on how to differentiate yourself, or at least what the pieces are that the school districts are actually looking at, so that you know how to bring to the forefront what your differentiating pieces are. Thanks, William, for adding that.
Yeah, and Parsa, I'll add one more thing based off of what you said. The other thing you see in a lot of these RFPs is the timing and the style of delivery. So you'll see, virtual versus face-to-face, and during school versus in-person, during school versus before or after school. And so the fact that a lot of districts are looking for, or they're willing to work with during the school day virtual tutoring is something we're seeing more and more of. They're looking for during the day virtual models. I think that fits well for the audience, because during the school day in the States is, maybe after your normal work hours for most folks on the call.
Yep. And I know, William, we're going back and forth before jumping into topic 2. I'll just underscore the importance of what William's saying, because the idea of teachers being overworked and there being a teacher shortage isn't just something that is specific to the UK or the US, it's everywhere in the world. So I know we have folks from, I think I saw the UAE, from the UK, from everywhere. And so this is a global challenge that we need to address. So in the US, it's becoming increasingly common. What William's saying is what some groups call push-in tutoring. So it's not tuition that's provided, let's say, before school or after school typical hours, but it's actually baked into the schedule of the school day. And so it supplements or it complements what the teachers are doing in the classroom. But some of these poor teachers have 30, 40 kids, 20 of them during COVID might have been in the classroom, 20 of them might have been online, and the teachers expected to teach to both groups simultaneously. It was really a wild experience for those that were teaching in the classroom, and those like me and like William who were able to tour the classrooms and provide services, whether directly or through our partners. So it's just something to keep in mind, the reality of the situation, and this is continuing in many communities throughout the US. And I did see a point in the chat, someone from CTG Tutor. We will put our contact information in the last slide, or you can reach out to the folks that are organizing the festival if you want to connect with me and with William. We hope the third topic will touch on how you become an approved vendor, how to find these RFPs, etc. So hopefully we will address that. Great. Let's go ahead and move on to the second topic. I have it here on the screen, and it's specifically what districts are looking for in terms of tutoring. I didn't think it was that funny, but I guess it was. So we'll go ahead and ground the conversation here. And you see the slide about the ESSER funds, right? The Rescue Plan Act. Okay, great. William, you already touched on this. I can turn this over to you, or we can move on to the next slide, your call.
I was just pulling the tutoring research to drop in for Lucy here. Yeah, I think we touched on this for the most part. Bottom line, there's a lot of money going into tutoring, and it will continue to be there for the next few years. There's about we're talking about this money as if it was just this like one-time influx of cash, and that may have been true, but it also had like about a 5-year time horizon in most places. And so there's still a good bit of time. And then the other part of this, and I know Parsa, you've noticed this as well, all this money is being allocated to tutoring. A lot of it is not being spent. A lot of it is still sitting on the table because schools are struggling to find the partners and do all the logistics to actually match students with tutoring providers. And so there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yep, I'd agree wholeheartedly with William. And then remember, before COVID hit, there was still tutoring that was provided for schools and districts in the US. So there's a category of funding, it's called Title I funding in the US. And so with Title I funding, it's about a $15 billion federal program. William, correct me if I'm wrong. It has pretty much bipartisan support through any given presidential administration in the US. And you can spend these Title I funds on one of about 10 approved areas. And to qualify for that funding, so the federal government provides this $15 billion worth of funding, essentially to the states, depending on the state you're in, but to the individual districts. And one of the largest spends has always been tutoring. So there's been tutoring, teacher training, technology, et cetera. But tutoring has really pushed up to the top 3, I think it was, even prior to COVID. So as recently as 2018, 2019. And now during COVID, I think William told me something interesting, that of this money from the federal government, the #1 spend for school districts is to update filtration systems, I believe. So the air, obviously because of COVID. And the #2 spend is on tutoring. And that's a stat I actually didn't know until William confirmed that for me. So it just gives you a sense of how much districts are spending. And this isn't going to disappear in a year or 2 years. We hopefully get a good grasp on this endemic that's going to continue forward. So it's just something to keep in mind about positioning ourselves to be there as quality, high dosage tutoring providers. Great. These are the components that William, I believe you were alluding to earlier, something that William and I have spoken about. So if you're thinking, well, what's stopping me as an individual or as a representative of my tutoring company to expand to the States, to the US, there are 3 main areas that you need to make sure to check off. The first is staffing qualified empathetic tutors. These can be teachers in the communities that you work in, even though you need to have those relationships and that ability to grow that business. William at Canopy, his business has been incredibly successful because they have a lot of programming and infrastructure around saying, okay, we can use our tutors that we recruit, or we can help you turn your teachers into tutors, let's say during the summertime, when the teachers technically have time off, but they're preparing for the upcoming school year. And a lot of them are being recruited to work for extended learning during the summer. The second is what we call standards aligned content or curriculum. So think of that as making sure you're teaching, whether it's maths or English, it's directly relatable to what the students are learning in the classroom, related to state standards, and then mapping to the Common Core national standards. And then third is a platform. So especially if you're going to deliver the online tutoring, we'll go into this in a future slide, I believe. Yeah, I think we'll go into this in a future slide, but just the idea of all the bells and whistles, all the boxes that you have to check in order to have a safe, secure platform. And you actually need to report everything: student attendance, engagement, and the ensuing, hopefully, academic and social emotional outcomes that come with it. But it's still those 3 boxes that you have to check: the tutors, the content, and the platform for the delivery of the online tutoring. William, anything to add there?
No, I will just emphasize the standards aligned content piece. The way that you often see that show up in RFPs is that it says that the tutoring must align with the curriculum being used by the school or the district, but they won't usually tell you what that is. If you can find that out and write in there that you're aligned with it, that's really helpful. Alignment between curriculum and standards is really important in the US. And that doesn't mean you need to completely redo everything or come up with a new system. A lot of times the alignment is just a sequencing question, like what order are you teaching the different skills in? That can in many times help with the alignment part there.
Sounds great. And I'll address one of the comments in the chat that's relevant from Sarah. So the second question about the whole of the US following Common Core. Yeah, so Common Core was a push years ago. And so if you go online and type in Common Core standards, let's say for math or for English, you'll see for, let's say, Algebra 1, which is same sort of thing everywhere in the world, but it's different in terms of the requirements or how you exemplify mastery, let's say for a student in the US versus maybe in another part of the world. So all of that's available online. We're not going to go into the specifics of the credits and all that stuff like your first question, Sarah, but I did say earlier that you're welcome to reach out to me or to William, and William is getting everyone started on some research with, for example, the Annenberg Institute, which put out a lot of this high dosage tutoring research that will help guide you in terms of the blueprint of how to provide a nice repeatable tutoring strategy. I did touch on the platform for the delivery of tutoring. see how we're doing on time here. We might continue forward and revisit this slide. I just say the big piece of this is that for those of you on the call, I'm making a big assumption here that if you're interested in learning more about selling to US schools, you may be assuming that you're going to be providing virtual tutoring to students in the US. So there are some barriers to that. For example, some districts or states require that individuals be based in the US or in Canada, for example, so in North America. It really depends, but you do need to have certain integrations and be able to deliver the content through your system. And that's why part of William's business is this learning management system or this content management system, so that his tutors or other tutors, right, can teach the students through William's platform. And it's why our whole business at GoSchoolBox is just supporting tutoring companies, let's say, that might not have a platform, but have been around with quality tutoring, quality content for, let's say, 10, 20, 30 years. And they want to take that step to go virtual, or they want to scale their offering instead of, having a Zoom link and a Google form, and then the content where you're sharing your screen, but really embedding that. So we can dig into that if anyone wants, maybe after the presentation. But I did also want to make sure to touch on the scale. So you're identifying the right opportunities for your business and not going after a 200,000 student district if you can only maybe service 200 students. Great. William, should we move on to the third topic, actually breaking down an RFP, or did you want to add something first?
Yeah, I mean, just to name the fact that we both do this work and we have platforms that help us do the work. GoSchoolBox is really effective for organizing the operations of all the pieces, and you will usually have to address those questions in the RFP. And then Canopy is used to organize curriculum, right? So we have all of our tutoring curriculum organized in the Canopy platform. We also license that curriculum, even when we're not providing direct tutoring services. We license it to schools that do it on their own. And so if in the process of putting this together, you're looking for solutions there, we can support, but we don't need to get too far down that.
Yep, sounds great. Yeah, when people, if you or your organizations really genuinely look into expanding in the US, you will probably have one or maybe two of these three pieces checked off. So you might have your platform and pride yourself on that, but you don't have the content, right? The schools were providing you with the content, or how on earth are you going to staff tutors in the US when you don't have a presence in the US? So any questions about that, any tips, doesn't just have to be related to the platform. Shoot us a note. Again, our contact information will be on the last slide, or you can reach out to the Love Tutoring team about that as well. Okay. And as we move on to the third topic, I see a question in the chat about how the proposals are split up. So let's hold that question, and hopefully we will answer that question here. Now we'll break down actually a real RFP. So William, before we jump into it, it's going to be the Powder Springs RFP out of Georgia. I'm not sure if you saw that one. It's just a clean, nice example to go over with the group here. And for everyone here, we're going to the last topic. So we're pretty good on time. If you want to keep dropping questions in the chat, William and I will either address those by typing back or midway through and at the end of the presentation. Here, I am grossly oversimplifying. I want to be very clear. The steps to winning a request for a proposal, so a tender that's put out by a school or district. But the first piece of it is a written response. So think of it as being back in grade school and having to submit a book report. That's truly what it's like. Some of these go from 6 pages in length to 40 pages in length. With everything, all the requirements that you really need to reply to. And think of the written response as your opportunity to showcase on paper the legitimacy of your organization and how well you align with the goals and the expectations of the school district. And your goal is to essentially get to the live presentation. So that's a screening step for a lot of tutoring providers. And you get to the live presentation where you can actually present a live demo, field questions in real time from the administrators of the district, and make the case for how your platform or your tutoring offering is differentiated from everyone else who's applying. William, do you want to add any nuance here to this slide?
I'll just say, at a high level, the genre of writing an RFP is one where you tell them exactly what they want to hear. Sometimes people write an RFP and say like, oh, my model is a little bit different and it's so effective and so interesting that they will, I'm going to go off script on what they're asking for, and I'm going to write something that they should be interested in. But that will not be effective. Oftentimes the people evaluating the RFPs are actually different from the ones who manage the program or, you know, are actually involved in the tutoring. And so you need to differentiate yourself and show how you're better, but you also need to stay between the lines when responding to what they're looking for.
That's a great point, William. And I would frame it slightly differently. So William is being very candid about his approach, let's say, to applying to the RFPs. I'd say a really easy way is to scroll to the last page or the last few pages of the RFP, and there will be a rubric. So another way of translating what William's saying is, if your business provides everything under the sun, the school district may not need everything, right? They may just need what they're focused on, which is why they've issued this RFP. And a reason why a school district, or let's say State Department of Ed, will have a number of approved vendors is because there's a very real and pressing need for this. And the need was probably identified months ago, dare I say over a year ago, and they had to go through the process knowing this problem is persisting, right? Let's say gap in English language learning, maths, social emotional learning, whatever it is, to set up this formal process to push out this RFP. So time is really of the essence, and you'll see about a 1 month or a 2 month trail from putting out the RFP to the close for submissions. And then let's say another month or so after that to actually select the vendors. And pretty much once you're selected, let's say it would be late summer, you might have to start right in the fall. So the timing varies, but it can be anywhere from, let's say, 1 month to 3 months. And you've usually surpassed a certain threshold of dollars spent, which is why the schools and the districts aren't just going with a local tutoring provider or someone they've used in the past, because this is probably at a scale that requires to put out an RFP by law, or because the school district wants to attract maybe some larger providers that have more experience supporting students at scale. Let's dig in here. You all see this right on the left-hand side. You see a screenshot on the right-hand side, an overview. Okay, so what we're gonna do is go through and just put yourselves in our shoes. That's going to be our focus here for me and William, which is to think, when William and I pull up a request for a proposal, which by the way, you can find by signing up for a bunch of sites and programs that will bubble up RFP opportunities. So they'll just send it to your inbox every day, every week. There will be a number of requests for proposals put out, and William and I will actually pull these up, or members of our team will pull these up, and we'll skim through. And we have this checklist in our mind based on what we know about our respective businesses and the partners that we work with. So at GoSchoolBox, we just provide a platform, right? But we have a lot of tutoring providers that like to collaborate with us to apply to these requests for proposals. So a few things we look at is okay, when is the deadline for the response? It looks like proposals should be received no later than Monday, May 2nd. If there's a contact person for questions, it looks like Kelly is the contact person here. She's the city clerk. And then third is any sort of background information. Where is this district located? Is it in person versus virtual tutoring? Ideally, we disqualify this RFP if we don't feel as though our business is in a great spot to apply, because it takes a lot of time. And I see William nodding his head to even get organized around responding to an RFP. So William, we have 4 of these slides, I believe, going through 4 sections of the RFP. Is there anything else you think through when first pulling up an RFP?
Yeah, I mean, I do what you mentioned. So reading the intro, looking for the formats they want, and the goal is not to like figure out a way to apply for it at first. The goal at first is to figure out if this is something that we should apply for, because you don't want to waste your time. And as you mentioned, it is time consuming. And then looking at that rubric piece, which again is the most important thing. Know the rubric they're going to use. So oftentimes they provide it, sometimes they don't.
And my experience, William, they either provide the rubric or they're very particular about the wording right throughout the request for proposal, or there's a different section like expectations, qualifications, whatever it is. And you can really tell what the school district is looking for, or how to get on an approved list, or the steps that you would need to take. So that underscores William's point from earlier, right? Where it's, you can tell what people are looking for. And so you either meet those requirements or you don't, but you really want to focus on what the school districts, are asking.
Yeah, and Parsa, I'll also build off a point that you made earlier as well, where you mentioned we just provide the platform, but you partner with tutoring organizations when you go in on these. Most likely for folks on the call, when you're looking through this, you'll start to feel maybe sad and overwhelmed that you don't meet all of the criteria that they're describing. It's okay to develop partnerships. Both of our organizations, I think, would be willing to partner if it made sense. There are other organizations you can partner with, so that together you can say that you can meet all of the criteria.
Yep. And it may seem like common sense for everyone here to say, look, 1 + 1 = 11 in some situations. So there might be RFPs out. So here, I don't think it says specifically, but it says later in the RFP, where we want you to service grades kindergarten through 8. So through grade 8, right? And you might really focus on early literacy. So really the young students, you would automatically be disqualified from applying on your own because you don't service students from ages, let's say 11 to 13, right? So years 6 through 8 in school. But William's organization might specialize in that middle school that we call it here in the US, and you're specializing in what we call elementary school. So coming together would be excellent. Unfortunately, a lot of tutoring companies in the US do not collaborate. So that's why actually it's great that I bet in some situations, William and I might be going head to head in some RFPs, requests for proposals. But what we try to do, and what we will do after the call, we actually met through the Love Tutoring Festival, which was awesome, right? Another benefit is meeting folks like William, because we can sit down and talk candidly about what our expectations are, what our goals are, and we will either apply separately or we will apply together. And what I will say is the reality of the situation is you will have one person applying as the main person in the tutoring, or sorry, for the responding to the RFP, and you are in many cases allowed to have subcontractors as long as they're delineated in the request. It might actually strengthen your case to say, okay, I am working with William of Canopy Ed, and you know his track record in the state of Louisiana. Look it up here. It's the most active approved vendor on the list. We are working together because of X, Y, or Z reason. And that can be really powerful if done right. Now let's move on to the next slide here. Sorry, my screen's a little slow to load. Jumped ahead. Let me know when you can see. Okay, great. Specific requests, right? Great. Now we're reading through the RFP, and this request for proposal, I used it because, and by the way, on the left-hand side, this is a direct screenshot of what they call the scope of services. Think of it as the statement of work, whatever you might call it. So here in this school district in this city, they are talking about the student to tutor ratio, right? So 2 students per tutor. That's really important. The ratio might be 1 to 1. It might be 7 to 1. Usually we see 4 to 1 or fewer students per tutor. And that's in big part due to what William had touched on earlier, right? He put a link in the chat if everyone scrolls up from the Annenberg Institute. They're lauded as providing some of the best research on high dosage tutoring. And I would recommend getting very familiar with that. But they also provide some additional information, right? So frequency of tutoring sessions, number of sessions per student, the duration of time, the type of students you're working with, in-person versus virtual. So any of these could be disqualifying pieces and might encourage you either to shift your focus to another RFP or to seek out a partner, like what William was mentioning. And again, it's this checklist that you will ultimately put together for your organization. William, anything to add here?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, sounds good. And we'll come back to the chat, I promise. I just want to make sure we cover the last 2 slides and then we can focus on questions. Third is there are a number of business requirements. So we've gotten set up at GoSchoolBox to do business in the UK and in some other markets as well. And there are always these business requirements just to get started up. But I will highlight insurance as a really important one because there are very specific requests for coverage, but some of the coverage you might not need. So I wouldn't be too quick to say, okay, well, we don't qualify because we don't have automobile liability insurance. Well, if you're providing virtual tutoring services, there may be a small addendum that says this is not relevant, or if this insurance requirement is not relevant to the services provided, then please disregard. And you might have been a great fit, but you saw there's automobile liability insurance, the RFP is due in 48 hours, and you decide not to apply. So yeah, just stay calm through the process, make sure to ask questions. Surprisingly, the school districts, even though they're overloaded, they are great at responding to questions. So they will have a period where you can ask questions and the school district will post responses, and the school district will actually hold hearings, kind of like this, where tutoring vendors can be on live and ask any questions that they have. Now, a disqualifying piece sometimes is asking for references. It is a little unfair when you're getting started out, or it feels unfair because a school district is saying you cannot apply unless you have 2 or 3 references from previous school districts that you have serviced focused on a similar student population. So if you're on this call, calling in from the UK or wherever else around the world you are, and you're looking to set up your business in the US, that can seem like a chicken before the egg problem of how do you have references without getting a school district? And how do you get a school district that you're servicing without references? So there are ways to get around that, like servicing a nonprofit first, providing some tutoring, or reaching out to see if you can cite tutoring data from individual families that you've supported or schools or institutions you've supported around the world. But just know that that's another reason why the folks on this call might think about linking up, let's say, with a Friendly Face or another company that's based in the US. William, anything to add here?
It does seem like a lot of these are just sort of irrelevant hoops a lot of the time. This has to do with just how the bureaucracy is set up and laws that were written to require certain things in certain places. But I will say that once you jump through those hoops, you will find that there aren't very many other people around you. And there's a lot more room to growth in this way than just general marketing to private schools, et cetera, because you actually have a foot in the door.
Certainly. And I see a couple questions in the chat. I'll comment on Khaled's message about specific classes and categories. So asking whether tutoring companies get classified, almost like, put in a specific bucket or in a box related to the services that they're providing. So I'm tweaking your question a little bit intentionally, because you should think about your business to stay really disciplined as specializing in a certain category. So ideally you're best in class, right? Again, providing maths tutoring for students age 11 to 13 who are 2 or 3 years behind grade level, or who are English language learners, meaning they're great at math, but they don't understand English. So how are you supposed to answer the question, let's say, of a word problem, if you can't actually read the text that comes along with it? So you might have bilingual tutors. So I would just say, from the short time that I've known William, so these past few weeks, his company is very disciplined, and they're great at saying no to opportunities that aren't in their wheelhouse, but they're great at going after that, frees them up to go after the opportunities that they feel that they are uniquely qualified for. So I would actually say the onus is on, and the freedom is on, the individual tutoring companies to decide how they want to categorize themselves and which RFPs that they want to go over. Great. Let's go into the last topic here. Sorry. Let's see. You're welcome. And I think it's loading to go back one slide, I hope. It's just a little slow to load on my screen. Apologies. But let me know when people see. Oh, I just had it. Great. Okay, this is the fourth and final slide. So the evaluation and award criteria. William, this is exactly what you're talking about, which is the rubric. Okay, it might not be spelled out as a rubric, but the methodology and approach you see at the bottom, combined with how you're being evaluated, even if it's not 5 points here, 10 points in this category, you can get a sense of what's really important to certain school districts. And for the most part, William, I have seen that these come from a good place, a place of wanting to try to be impartial and choose the best tutoring provider or providers. But you will see some leaning towards, let's say, if a school district has worked with another tutoring provider in the past for 3 years and that contract is up, a school district is required to issue another request for proposal for, let's say, another 3 years. You will see some hints at what a school district wants reflected there. So just by doing some quick Googling, so I could do City of Powder Springs, Georgia tutoring, I can see what tutoring providers the district has liked using in the past for their schools, and maybe which providers have come under fire for not actually following through with their services. And I can be very strategic about how I'm weighting what I'm speaking about in my response to the request for proposal. I'd say that William is great at this. We at GoSchoolBox apply to a number of RFPs with partners. We're usually supporting partners in applying to the RFPs, or taking the lead if our partners ask us to, our partners being the tutoring providers. But again, I'd say William's best in class, his organization, at knowing how to intentionally apply to these opportunities. So William, before we just turn it over fully to questions for the last 5 minutes or so, anything that you want to close on here with this slide about the RFPs?
No, I think you did an excellent job of hitting the main point. We should do like a little masterclass video on this. I think other folks would find this, like the broad RFP process, really useful. And just emphasizing, just right to the rubric, right to what they're looking for. You can figure out ways to bring in what's interesting about you, but there's no bonus points for like cool idea we hadn't thought of. They can only score the things that they had in their mind going into it.
Yep. And less is more. So maybe we end with this point, but we've been on live calls with tutoring providers that we work with, and we felt as though we were a shoe-in, this coalition, essentially this partnership between top tutoring providers servicing a very specific population of students, and the GoSchoolBox platform that checks off all the boxes related to technology, makes it easier to, let's say, upload the content William has to 1,000 sessions simultaneously, tracking the progress, all that. And the tutoring provider, if we don't align on what we want to cover during the call and they haven't done their research or we haven't done our research, then we'll go in and be speaking about something that's directly irrelevant or completely irrelevant to what we're actually speaking about. So we had a tutoring provider that was focused on another business or another opportunity, right, that they have to service students. And what I just express is the patience. So I'd say focus for the first piece of it on getting your foot in the door, doing an excellent job at whatever you're going to do. So my father used to tell me growing up, if you're going to be a bench warmer on this soccer team, be the best bench warmer that the team has ever had, and then bide your time for that time where you get subbed in on the actual pitch to play, right? This would be the same thing. So if you're provide English and maths tutoring, great. But if this is an RFP for maths tutoring, focus on that for grades 6 through 8, and then come back around when they issue an RFP for English, or once you're already in, then you can tack that on to the services that you already provide. So that's something really important on putting the cart before the horse that we see with our partners, some of our newer partners. And I imagine William's seen himself, not that he would ever make that mistake maybe years ago, many moons ago. But with that, I will leave this slide up. Our contact information is here via email. Please be patient if it takes us a little bit of time to get back to all of you, but we would love to collaborate, answer any questions that you may have. And it looks like we have a few minutes left. So Georgina, should we take live questions or go over anything in the chat that you flagged?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. That is probably a lot of information, and from what's been happening in the chat, it looks like people have a very varied experience of what we're talking about there. So there have been some interesting questions in the chat so far, but if anybody has any questions that they want to share, don't hold back. We've got a few more minutes on the session, followed by a 10-minute break. So completely up to you guys how much. I appreciate that it's very early and you've already given us a lot. So yeah, I'm happy to go through what's in the chat.
while we pull questions from the chat, and if you put a question in the chat earlier and we didn't get to it, please go ahead and copy and paste it into the bottom. Right now, I'll just say 3 reasons to reach out to me specifically following this. Number 1, if you want to organize your curriculum on Canopy, that's great. Reach out to me. We can talk about that. Number 2 is that as far as getting notified of RFPs, there's a number of different services you can subscribe to. I've been a part of a number of them. I personally think that Bid Prime is the best. And I reached out to our sales rep there, telling him about this festival and asking if he could offer free trials to folks that were interested. And he said that he could. So if you want to get a free trial to Bid Prime so that you can get these RFPs, oftentimes it costs thousands of dollars to subscribe for the year. But if you want to get a month free trial to Bid Prime, reach out to me and let me know. And then finally, a lot of these RFPs that have an opening for virtual during the school day tutoring, we've been looking at those, but we don't have a strong enough roster of qualified tutors that can work at that time, because most of our tutors are educators working during the day. And so if you're interested in being tutor contractors, forget about the larger piece here, but just providing the tutoring services, we could write you into some of our RFPs that are using that kind of model. So let me know for that. So again, the platform, the Bid Prime trial, or to be a tutor that's part of an RFP that we're being lead on. Feel free to reach out to me.
Agreed with everything that William said. And if you'd like, if William and I both touched on any points, again, William and I are meeting tomorrow actually to chat about synergies between our organizations. You can throw us both on that email, feel free. But also I'd encourage everyone, even if you feel as though you have a one-off question, maybe folks in the chat where William was putting research links in the chat that Georgina also reposted, you can still reach out to us about that. We'd be happy, even if it's just sending you off in a direction where you can take a look and start educating yourselves on the opportunity. You can do that. Personally, I will be, and a couple members of our team will be in the UK, specifically in London in September. We'll also be going to the UAE and a couple other areas. So also, if anyone wants any support within the UK or any services that you provide around the world, at GoSchoolBox, we are making inroads elsewhere. So happy to chat about that. But thank you everyone for your time. Georgina, I think we're all set here. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much. There's been a very, very enthusiastic chat going on here. So I think people were really interested in this, and you've given us a really, really detailed explanation. So thank you so much for that. I have a feeling you'll be getting quite a few people taking you up on your email offer.
Sounds great.
And Sarah just put this in, math being very different in the US versus the UK. Number 1 is we don't have the S on the end of it. We just say math. How can you support with the change? I would look at the Common Core standards. Most states don't call them Common Core anymore because of political reasons. But if you look at what's in there, most state standards will actually mirror the Common Core. So look at this, the competencies and sequencing that they have there, and that would be 90% of the solution.
Thank you very much. Did anybody have anything to pick up on, or should we let William and Parsa have a nap? I think they've earned it now. Yeah, so you'll be hearing from Elizabeth soon, I think. Perfect. Thank you both. Thank you both for joining us so early today and providing a lot of value. That was really interesting. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Speak to you soon. All right.
Well, thank you.
Wonderful. Okay.